The nation's capital became a target zone. On Thanksgiving Eve, a gunman ambushed 2 National Guard members near the White House perimeter. The attacker used a vehicle for approach. Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, 20, died from her injuries on Thanksgiving night. The suspect, an Afghan national with prior CIA partner force experience, was tracked across state lines. Federal authorities are now executing search warrants to determine if this was a lone wolf attack or a coordinated cell. The surge in vehicular violence continues. In the Denver metro area, 2 road rage shootings have occurred in rapid succession. In Jefferson County, Colorado, a driver fired laterally into a passing SUV, critically wounding a passenger. The suspect immediately fled and attempted to delete home surveillance footage. In southwest Denver, a separate traffic dispute escalated to a homicide on a residential street. 1 man is dead. The shooter remains at large. Colorado faces a public health crisis in the resolution of traffic disputes. In Houston, a pop-up party turned into a mass casualty event. 1 woman was killed, 9 others were injured by indiscriminate gunfire. Multiple unknown suspects fired into the crowd and fled the chaotic scene. The victimology shows a notable gender skew, with 7 women among the 9 injured survivors. Houston homicide detectives are now reliant on human intelligence to break the case. In Maryland, a fire investigation evolved into a triple homicide inquiry. Forensic pathology confirmed 3 victims suffered trauma inconsistent with fire death. Arson was used to conceal the violence. State police launched a rapid series of arrests across multiple jurisdictions, charging 4 suspects with first-degree murder and conspiracy. This cross-jurisdictional network suggests high-level planning. A violent death in a safe suburb. In Fishers, Indiana, a spontaneous dispute at the BRITTON Tavern escalated to a fatal shooting at closing time. 1 man was killed. The suspect was apprehended at the scene. The incident highlights the instant lethality that firearms introduce into peer conflicts. These 15 cases represent the violence of the past week. The evidence record is now open.
Let's begin.
The incident occurred on Wednesday, November 27, 2025, near the White House perimeter. 2 members of the West Virginia National Guard were static in their vehicle. The assailant, Ramanullah Lochinwall, executed a kinetic strike against uniformed personnel. He approached the vehicle and opened fire. 20-year-old Specialist Sarah Beckstrom was killed. Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, 24, was critically wounded. The assault took place on Thanksgiving Eve, maximizing its psychological impact. Lochinwall initially evaded immediate neutralization by federal law enforcement assets.
The tactical classification is an ambush, meaning the victims lacked the ODA loop advantage required for a defensive response. The close proximity firearm use triggered a massive multi-agency response from the FBI, Secret Service, and Metro Police. Investigative focus quickly shifted to Lochinwall's background as an Afghan national who entered the U.S. in 2021. His former work with the CIA in Kandahar implies training in small arms and tactical maneuvering. The recovery of electronic devices from a Washington state residence highlights the role of digital forensics in expanding the threat assessment. This data is crucial to determining if the action was a lone wolf operation or part of a coordinated cell.
Lochinwall is now in custody, charged with first-degree murder following Beckstrom's death. In this jurisdiction, first-degree murder requires proof of premeditation and deliberation. The classification of the attack as an ambush supports this element. The death of uniformed personnel makes this a direct attack on state authority. The suspect's status as a special immigrant visa holder is expected to trigger rigorous reviews of the vetting procedures for SIV recipients. This investigation is cross-jurisdictional, involving the execution of search warrants across state lines. The legal severity is underscored by the high-level executive announcement of the soldier's death. In Northridge, California, the intersection of fame and violence claimed a life on November 22. Rising Latin music artist and influencer Maria De La Rosa was a passenger in a parked car on Bryant Street at 1:25 a.m. 3 men, Francisco Gaetan, Benny Licken Gomez, and Eduardo Lopez, approached the vehicle in a coordinated attack. The confrontation escalated immediately from a robbery demand to lethal force. The assailants opened fire, striking all 3 occupants. De La Rosa was killed and her 2 friends survived with critical injuries.
The tactical breakdown suggests a predatory pack mentality in the coordinated approach and immediate escalation to lethal force. Firing into a vehicle containing 3 passengers is a high-risk maneuver, indicating a reckless disregard for the legal consequences. The rapid apprehension of 2 suspects, Gaetan and Lican Gomez, is a testament to the effective use of digital forensics, specifically license plate readers and cell tower dumps, provided the digital breadcrumbs necessary to track and apprehend the assailants. The 3rd suspect, Eduardo Lopez, remains a fugitive, posing an ongoing threat to the community.
The swift filing of murder charges by the district attorney signals a prosecutorial priority on violent street crime. The suspects are charged with murder and attempted murder. In this case, the legal element of malice aforethought is supported by the immediate escalation from robbery to lethal force and the indiscriminate firing into the vehicle. The high bail amounts set for the arrested suspects, exceeding $2 million, reflect the judiciary's assessment of their significant flight risk and danger to the community. The targeting of an influencer, who publicized her location and status, represents an emerging crime trend. A horrific discovery in Clear Spring, Maryland, initiated a sprawling homicide investigation. On November 18, fire crews responded to a blaze at a single-family home on National Pike. Inside the fire-damaged structure, 3 bodies were found: Brittany Ray, Harold Fleischman, and Brianna Mae Weishar. The initial scene was processed as a fatal accident. However, autopsies quickly revealed trauma inconsistent with fire death. Police say the perpetrators traveled significant distances from urban centers to commit this act in a rural community. The case immediately pivoted to a triple homicide inquiry.
The attempt to conceal the homicides using arson constitutes a forensic countermeasure. However, the critical role of forensic pathology and arson investigation unraveled the cover-up. The presence of trauma, such as gunshot wounds or blunt force injuries, discovered during autopsy, directly contradicted the fatal fire narrative. The coordination required to kill 3 adults and set a structure fire suggests a high degree of planning and the involvement of multiple actors. The recovery of narcotics and firearms during the subsequent arrest phase suggests a potential drug nexus or robbery as a motive.
Maryland State Police arrested 4 suspects across multiple jurisdictions between November 23 and 29. 3 men, Darnell Hawkins, Tony Smith, and Maurice Pozon, are charged with first-degree murder and arson. A 4th suspect, Kiera White, was charged as an accessory. The charges of arson and conspiracy in conjunction with first-degree murder are among the most severe in the criminal code. The accessory charge suggests logistical support or safe harbor was provided post-offense. This rapid pivot from accidental death to a capital crime highlights the efficacy of the Maryland State Police Homicide Unit. Road rage turned into a fight for life on Tuesday, November 26 in Jefferson County, Colorado. Cassie Moy was a passenger in an SUV traveling on Highway 285. The SUV passed another vehicle, a Subaru, on the right side of the road. This simple traffic maneuver reportedly triggered a lethal, disproportionate aggression response from the Subaru's driver, 56-year-old Matthew Impellitteri. Impellitteri accelerated to match the SUV's speed, engaging in a pacing maneuver, and fired laterally into the passenger window. Moy was struck in the head.
This incident is tactically classified as vehicular hunting behavior, indicating that the suspect actively pursued and targeted the victim's vehicle. The act of firing laterally into a moving vehicle requires a high degree of dexterity and malice. The trajectory of the bullet, striking the passenger in the head, suggests the shooter aimed high and had the intent to kill. Impellitteri's post-event actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. He fled the scene, concealed his vehicle, and attempted to delete surveillance footage from his home security system, entering a calculated cleanup phase.
Impellitteri was quickly located walking near the scene and was arrested. He is charged with attempted murder. In this jurisdiction, the charge of attempted first-degree murder requires the prosecution to prove the defendant acted with the specific intent to kill and took a substantial step toward commission. The lateral firing into the occupied vehicle and the high trajectory of the shot provides evidence for this element of specific intent. Impellitteri is being held on a $1 million cash bond. Cassie Moy remains in critical condition. A celebration in southwest Houston ended in mass violence late Sunday night, November 24. The shooting occurred at an event space on Vandalia Way. These pop-up venues often lack professional security or capacity controls. Gunfire suddenly erupted in the parking lot where a large crowd had gathered. The casualty count indicates indiscriminate firing into a dense crowd. One woman, identified as Miss Williams, was pronounced dead at the scene. 9 others, 7 women and 2 men, were rushed to hospitals with gunshot wounds.
The tactical breakdown suggests a spray-and-pray maneuver, common in ego-driven disputes at large gatherings. The fact that multiple unknown suspects are cited suggests a chaotic engagement, possibly involving multiple aggressors. The scene's complexity and the lack of immediate arrests point to a difficult investigative environment, where witness cooperation may be low due to fear of retaliation. Ballistics evidence from recovered shell casings will be crucial for determining the number of shooters and the types of weapons used in the attack. Homicide detectives are reliant on human intelligence to generate leads.
This incident meets the federal definition of a mass shooting, involving 4 or more individuals shot. The crime scene environment was an unregulated event space. The use of indiscriminate firing into a crowd creates a high-level public danger. This act can legally constitute aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for the injured parties and murder for the deceased victim. The fact that 7 of the 9 injured are women is a notable gender skew in the victimology. This mass casualty event creates a significant ripple effect of trauma through the surrounding community.
We have tracked 5 complex investigations, from the D.C. ambush assault that required a digital forensics pivot to the California influencer attack where LPR data led to rapid arrests. We've seen the critical work of forensic pathology to uncover a triple homicide masked by arson. These cases hinge on the science of reconstruction and identification. But straight ahead, a digital footprint changes everything in an execution-style killing. We track how police used real-time cell phone tracking to locate a suspect within 2 hours of a salt truck homicide.
In Pontiac, Michigan, a routine patrol led to a grim discovery on Saturday evening, November 29. Sheriff's deputies found a municipal pickup truck equipped with a salt spreader stopped motionless in the middle of Karen Court at 7:30 p.m. The victim, 52-year-old Antonio Jason Craig, was found slumped over the wheel. He had been shot multiple times and was unresponsive. The homicide is notable due to the victim's location inside a service vehicle, which is an anomalous target. The attack is classified as an execution-style hit, limiting the victim's escape routes.
The rapid closure rate of this case is directly attributed to advanced surveillance technology. Detectives likely utilized a combination of license plate readers, or ALPR, and real-time cell phone tracking, allowing them to conduct an electronic grid search rather than just a physical one. The suspect was not the driver of the getaway vehicle, but a passenger when apprehended in a neighboring jurisdiction. This fact suggests the presence of accomplices or a coordinated extraction plan post-offense. The investigative priority now is to determine the motive, whether this was random, a personal vendetta, or a case of mistaken identity.
A 26-year-old male suspect was apprehended within 2 hours of the body's discovery. He has been taken into custody and is facing homicide charges. The charge of homicide in this jurisdiction will rely heavily on proving the element of premeditation, which is suggested by the multiple gunshot wounds and the execution-style nature of the attack inside the vehicle. Attacks on individuals performing civic duties such as salting the roads erode the sense of civic order and elevate the public gravity of the offense. The prompt arrest is the first step toward justice for the victim. The quiet suburb of Fishers, Indiana, saw a fatal shooting in the early hours of Monday, December 1. Just before 3 a.m., calls reported shots fired at the BRITTON TAVERN, a long-standing commercial establishment. The shooting occurred at last call, a critical risk period for nightlife venues where intoxication levels are high. Police arrived to find one 30-year-old male victim down on the floor with fatal gunshot wounds. Officers quickly secured the building and detained the suspect, another 30-year-old male, at the scene without incident.
The tactical breakdown suggests a spontaneous escalation. The immediate apprehension of the suspect at the scene indicates that he either remained in a state of shock or intoxication, or was physically detained by security or bystanders until police arrived. This profile is inconsistent with a planned, premeditated act and suggests a verbal dispute turned physical, then lethal. The rarity of this event in an affluent suburb like Fishers places investigative pressure on police to quickly reconstruct the timeline and interview all available witnesses to fully understand the nature of the dispute.
The suspect is in custody and is expected to be charged with homicide. The fact that both men were the same age suggests a peer conflict dynamic. While the victim and suspect were known to each other, the presence of a firearm instantly converted a bar fight into a homicide investigation. Police Sergeant Angela Ellison released a statement reinforcing the narrative that this was an isolated dispute and not a random act, a crucial narrative management tactic for suburban police departments. A Sunday evening shopping trip in Maryland Heights, Missouri, descended into an officer-involved shooting, or OIS, on November 30. Police were called to a Walgreens on Dorset Road at 6 p.m. for a report of a man with a gun. This occurred during peak retail hours, with customers and staff inside the store. When officers arrived, the suspect actively engaged law enforcement. He fired at the police, demonstrating an active shooter behavior profile. An officer returned fire in a reactive defensive measure. The suspect was struck and killed.
The suspect's active engagement with law enforcement upon arrival suggests a high level of desperation or potential suicidal intent. The immediate neutralization of the suspect was a critical tactical outcome, preventing potential civilian casualties inside the busy commercial retail space. The investigation was immediately transferred to the St. Louis County Police to ensure procedural integrity. In this case, the primary forensic evidence sources will be the body camera footage from the responding officer and the comprehensive store surveillance footage. No officers or bystanders were injured, indicating effective tactical positioning by the responding units.
All officer-involved shootings automatically trigger an independent investigation to review the use of force. The legal standard applied here is the objective reasonableness standard from the Graham v. Connor Supreme Court precedent. This standard asks whether the officer's actions were objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting them, without regard to the officer's underlying intent. The suspect's act of firing first at the officers upon their arrival provides a strong legal defense for the officer's lethal reactive response. Before dawn on Sunday, November 30th, Philadelphia police responded to a critical situation in the Hunting Park neighborhood. The call came in at 4 a.m., a time of low visibility and high ambiguity. Officers located a woman on North 10th Street holding a gun to her own head. This behavior is characteristic of a severe mental health crisis. Officers attempted de-escalation, ordering her to drop the weapon. Police reports indicate the woman lowered the weapon and then pointed it directly at the officers. Two officers fired their service weapons, striking her in the torso. She later died at the hospital.
The transition from suicidal posturing to a direct threat, pointing the gun at police, is the critical point of the tactical timeline. The officers were forced to respond under an immediate threat to life. The recovered firearm was fully loaded with 19+1 rounds. This represents a significant potential threat to the officers and the surrounding community. Crucially, the weapon had an obliterated serial number. This is a key intelligence point suggesting the firearm was illicitly trafficked. The two officers involved are early career, with 3 and 2 years of service, respectively.
This officer-involved shooting is under heavy scrutiny by both the Internal Affairs Division and the District Attorney's Office. As in the Missouri case, the officer's use of force will be judged against the objective reasonableness standard. The act of pointing a loaded firearm at a police officer creates an immediate and undeniable threat to life, meeting the legal threshold for lethal force. The Philadelphia Police Department utilized the scoop and run tactic, transporting the wounded suspect to the hospital in their patrol car to reduce time to treatment. A dispute between neighbors turned deadly in San Antonio, Texas on the night of November 29. The incident occurred at the Icon Apartments on Patricia Drive around 10 p.m. Apartment complexes are frequent sites for domestic and interpersonal violence due to density and proximity. The incident began as a fight between two men, a 46-year-old victim and 22-year-old Salim Ben Abidi. The confrontation rapidly escalated to gunfire, killing the older man. The suspect, Abidi, immediately fled the scene and barricaded himself inside a nearby residence.
The tactical response by the San Antonio Police Department was textbook. The flight of the suspect and his subsequent entry into a residence immediately created a barricade situation. The rapid deployment of SWAT and the Street Crimes Unit established a perimeter and initiated negotiation for a surrender or call-out. This decisive action prevented a secondary confrontation or a high-risk shootout. The prompt identification of the suspect by witnesses was the key solvability factor, preventing Abidi from successfully evading the immediate police dragnet.
The suspect, 22-year-old Salim Ben Abidi, surrendered without further violence. He has been formally charged with murder. The legal charge stems from the escalation of a simple fight into lethal violence. Abidi is being held on a $350,000 bond. In this jurisdiction, the charge requires the prosecution to prove the defendant knowingly or intentionally caused the death of an individual. The age disparity between the 46-year-old victim and the 22-year-old suspect is notable, suggesting this may have been a generational or long-standing neighbor dispute. The evidence record continues to show the critical role of law enforcement in high-stakes tactical environments, from the precise barricade management in San Antonio to the use of force reviews in the two recent officer-involved shootings. We track incidents that span the national scope, from the urban streets of Baltimore to the affluent suburbs of Indianapolis. Still to come, the ongoing spike in vehicular violence as a second road rage homicide is confirmed in Denver. Next, a fugitive situation developing right now in Phoenix. In the early morning darkness of Saturday, November 29th, a man was found dead in North Phoenix. Police responded to a shooting call near the intersection of 19th Avenue and Thunderbird Road just before 2 a.m. The victim was discovered on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds and pronounced dead at the scene. A second victim was found nearby in critical condition and was rushed to the hospital. The incident occurred under the overpass, a location that strongly implies a connection to illicit transactional meetings or the unhoused community. The suspects fled before police arrived, leaving a cold scene for responders.
The discovery of the victim with multiple gunshot wounds suggests an execution or a close-range engagement rather than a drive-by shooting. The suspect's immediate flight resulted in a scene lacking physical leads or cooperative witnesses. Public space homicides at night often require investigators to rely on latent evidence and digital forensics to identify the shooters. Specifically, detectives are dependent on tips submitted to the Silent Witness program to generate leads. Reconstruction of the victim's last movements through digital data is crucial, as is the analysis of any available public or commercial surveillance footage.
This is a double shooting and is being investigated as a homicide with an attempted homicide of the surviving victim. The charge of aggravated assault for the surviving victim is likely, as the use of a firearm constitutes a deadly weapon. For the deceased victim, the multiple gunshot wounds support the charge of first-degree murder, which focuses on the premeditated and intentional nature of the act. The suspects remain at large, necessitating reliance on community cooperation to identify and apprehend the shooters. Road rage is also suspected in a homicide that occurred in southwest Denver on Saturday evening, November 29. Police were called to the 3000 block of South Winona Court, a residential zone, around 6 p.m. The evening time frame disrupts the perceived safety of the neighborhood. Officers found a man suffering from a gunshot wound. He was transported to the hospital but did not survive. Preliminary investigation strongly suggests the incident began as a traffic dispute that rapidly escalated to gunfire on the residential street. The suspect immediately fled the scene.
This is the second road rage case in this report, indicating a cluster and a regional spike in vehicular violence across the Denver metro area. The conflict originated in a vehicle but terminated with gunfire on a residential street. Since the suspect fled immediately, investigators must now scour the neighborhood for private home security camera footage and other commercial surveillance to identify the vehicle involved. The lack of an immediate arrest indicates that police are heavily reliant on the reconstruction of the event via digital data to establish the suspect's identity and flight path.
The use of a firearm to resolve a traffic dispute is becoming a distinct public health crisis in Colorado. The suspect is being sought on homicide or murder charges. Depending on the evidence, the charge could range from manslaughter to first-degree murder, though the swift escalation to gunfire suggests an intentional act. In this state, an escalation from a traffic offense to lethal force would likely meet the element of depraved indifference or reckless endangerment, supporting a high-level murder charge. The investigation is ongoing and the suspect remains at large. Tragedy struck Rock Hill, South Carolina just after midnight on Friday, November 29. police were called to the Eden Terrace apartment complex for reports of gunfire. The shooting involved two young men. 18-year-old Tyja Brevard was found dead from gunshot wounds at the scene. A second victim, a 20-year-old male, was also shot and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The timeline and location fit a pattern of youth violence. The victims are in the peak demographic for firearm homicide victimization.
The double shooting points to a targeted attack against a specific group or dyad. The timeline and location are consistent with youth violence, often precipitated by social media disputes or gang affiliations, though a specific motive has not yet been released. Investigators spent the night processing the scene and interviewing residents. The survival of the 20-year-old victim provides a crucial investigative lead. His ability and willingness to cooperate with law enforcement will be the key solvability factor for the investigation.
The police have confirmed this is a homicide investigation involving multiple victims. The specific charge for the shooter will be murder for Brevard and likely attempted murder or aggravated assault for the critically injured 20-year-old. Because the shooting occurred at a residential complex after midnight, the legal element of an unprovoked targeted attack on a specific dyad is strongly suggested. As of the current time, no suspect information has been released. The investigation is active as detectives work to track down the shooter who cut short a young life. A grim discovery was made in a South Minneapolis alleyway early Saturday morning, November 29. At 1:30 a.m., police responded to the Phillips neighborhood, an area that has historically struggled with higher crime rates. They found the body of 23-year-old Victoria Ann Day behind a residence. She had been shot. The medical examiner quickly ruled her death a homicide. The body's location in an alleyway suggests either a secluded execution at the scene or that the body was transported and dumped there, making the alley a secondary crime scene.
The lack of reported ShotSpotter activations or immediate witnesses in the area suggests a stealthy approach by the perpetrator or that the crime occurred in a low-traffic zone. The alleyway discovery is a significant investigative challenge. Since there are no suspects in custody, the investigation is relying heavily on extensive digital forensic work. Detectives must analyze Day's phone, local security cameras, and any other digital data to reconstruct her last known movements and identify who she was with before her death. Investigators are now appealing to the public for any information.
The ruling of the death as a homicide places this case under the direct jurisdiction of the Homicide Division. The lack of a known suspect means the charge will be murder, and the specific degree will be determined by the evidence of intent discovered during the forensic reconstruction. The location of the body in a low-visibility area will make the element of premeditation more difficult to prove without digital evidence that establishes intent or targeting. Police are actively seeking anyone who saw or heard anything in the Phillips neighborhood. Violence erupted on the streets of West Baltimore late Monday night, November 24. West Baltimore, specifically Poplar Grove, is a high-intensity crime zone. Police were called to Poplar Grove Street just before 11 p.m. They found a 29-year-old female victim, Weems, suffering from gunshot wounds. She was rushed to the hospital but did not survive. Moments later, a 31-year-old male walked into an area hospital with gunshot wounds from the same incident.
The tactical profile of this case is a split in victim disposition. One victim was too injured to move, and the other fled the scene to self-transport to the hospital. The fact that both victims were shot suggests they were standing together and targeted as a pair. Detectives believe both were targeted while on the street. The investigation is active, and ballistics analysis will be crucial to confirm a single shooter or multiple weapons. The death of the 29-year-old female victim adds to Baltimore's grim tally for 2025.
The investigation into this double shooting is active. The charges will be murder for the deceased female victim and either attempted murder or aggravated assault for the critically injured male. The act of targeting both individuals suggests a highly intentional and premeditated act of violence, supporting the charge of murder. As of now, police have not yet named a suspect or publicly determined the motive for this double shooting. The National Desk continues to monitor this high-intensity crime zone.
These 15 investigations remain fluid. As new forensic results return, as cell data is decrypted, and as court dates are set, the evidence record will be updated.
The National Desk is tracking every jurisdiction, every filing, and every development 24/7. The investigation continues. For True Crime Headline News, I'm Chris Adams.
And I'm Jessica Reed. Thank you for joining us today.